We're going to take some time, and I invite you to find in your Bibles book of Genesis. It's tough how to find it. I'd say start at the front cover and work from there. Genesis chapter 1. You want to find verse 26. It was about 2 to 3 weeks ago I was reading an article by a writer I really enjoy. His name is Eric Metaxas. And he wrote an article that was actually published in USA Today, and I was kind of surprised because I didn't even know USA Today was still in business, but apparently it is. And he opened his article with this question: what do Joseph Stalin, Kim Jong-un, and American library goers have in common? Joseph Stalin, Russia, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and American library goers. Have you guessed it? They all apparently deem a certain book to be very dangerous and are threatened by that book more than most any other book. You want to guess what the book is? The Bible. If you were found in possession of a Bible in Joseph Stalin's Russia, that would probably get you sent to the gulag. It's a fancy word for prison. If you're found with a Bible in North Korea under Kim Jong-un, it could be your death. That would be considered a capital offense. Now, it's not really hard to understand in regard to Stalin, in regard to North Korea, because the Bible is a threatening book, especially to tyrants or to governmental tyranny. Do you see why? The Bible's dangerous. The Bible says there is a God, and it is not the state. And the biggest threat to a government that would want to try to control and ask for full devotion from its people, the biggest threat would be God. Because government is trying to play God. And so when word gets out that government isn't God, that can make trouble for a tyranny or for a tyrannical government. Would you agree? Here's the other part. The Bible talks about human beings being made in the image of God. Meaning, we get our rights from God and not from the government. See why that would be a threat to a government-based tyranny? Because tyranny wants you to think you get your rights from the government. So if you're Joseph Stalin, it kind of makes sense to be a little bit threatened by a book that would have these dangerous ideas. And if you're Kim Jong-un, it's the same. It would be a threat for people to have in their hands a book that would threaten that power. So I think we can kind of cover the Joseph Stalin and Kim Jong-un side of things and why they see this book as a very dangerous thing. But what you have to understand is that in our country, the book you're holding, at least I trust you're still holding it, is coming to be seen as a dangerous book. It was in 2015 that the American Library Association released their list of most challenged books. That is, books that people or that the public are asking now for them to take off their shelves and to be banned. And guess what book made the list? You're holding it. That tells you something, doesn't it? It tells you something not just about our world, it tells you something about this book. I was watching a clip from CNN and political commentator Chris Cuomo. Have you ever heard of Chris Cuomo? Have you ever heard at least the last name Cuomo? It's all part of the family. He was having an interview with the Honorable Roy House. You may not recognize the name Roy House. He is the Chief Justice on the Alabama State Supreme Court. They had him on for an interview to discuss issues about marriage. But somewhere along the line, the conversation went a little bit different direction, and the conversation went to, where do we get our rights from? And Judge Roy House said, we get our rights. Our founders got it right. We get our rights from God. And Mr. Cuomo went apoplectic to say, no, we don't. We get them from man. But let me tell you something. If you get your rights from man, they can be taken from you by man. That's the conversation going on in our networks in our country. But there's more to it. I believe our culture, through, let me get this, affluence, through marketing, and through a lot of bad parenting, now has a God delusion. Richard Dawkins notwithstanding. Dawkins suggests that we have a God delusion in thinking that God exists. And I don't think that's the God delusion at all. You know what I think the God delusion is? We think we're God. There's nothing more threatening when you're trying to play God than this book. It is a dangerous book. Would you agree? And I'm okay for it to be the book that tyrants are afraid of. But I believe that it's a dangerous book, not just because it kind of violates some political agendas. I believe it's a dangerous book. Listen to me. Because it has a vision for human beings, a vision for human life that's incredibly high. And I think that when you have an incredibly high vision, people are either inspired by that or they're intimidated by it. I would submit to you that this book is threatening and dangerous, not just because it violates some personal or political agendas. I think it's intimidating because of its vision. The Bible has an incredibly high vision for human beings and human life. We are made for far more than what we ever thought. For the weeks that are ahead, we're going to be looking at the Bible's vision, particularly in regard to the relationships that matter most. We're going to be looking at the Bible's vision for marriage and for family. So that's where we're starting. And I think it was G.K. Chesterton said that as far as places to begin or to start, that the beginning is a very good place to start. So we're going to try that. And we're going to try Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to talk about God's vision for family. Genesis chapter 1. If you have that, we're going to start in. Let's try verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them, notice that plural, let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the cattle and over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Then he says, male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And he said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and rule over, that's not a real good, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over every living thing that moves on the earth. God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that's on the surface of all the earth, every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It will be food for you. And to every beast of the earth and bird of the sky and to everything that moves on the earth which has life, I've given it for food. And it was so. And God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Let's pray. And now, Father, in the time that awaits, I'm going to ask that you would speak and that we would hear. Amen. The vision for family. The Bible's vision for family. I'm going to try to lay this out in a couple of big ideas, and hopefully I can get it all done before my time's out. Ready? Here's the first idea. The first part of the vision that the Bible has for family. And the vision is about a foundation. This is crucial, y'all. That's the way we say it in Kentucky. Y'all. This is crucial. Let me tell you why it's crucial. Years ago, I was at a Promise Keepers event. Anyone ever go to a Promise Keepers event? This is mostly guys, obviously. Okay, so 3 of us have been to Promise Keeper events. Now, let me tell you about a time that I had. This was at Detroit. Was it something I said? No. This was in Detroit. Tony Evans, pastor at a church in Dallas. And he's sharing about when he had purchased a home there in Dallas. And he talks about that he went in and everything looked great, that everything was just kind of sparkling. And he goes in, and they're kind of they're getting everything unpacked and put away and everything like that, settling into the house. And he said he was down in the basement, they were kind of doing some things, and he happened to look up, and there on the wall, he saw some cracks on the wall. He thought, this probably isn't good, so he called his wall guy. Is that what you call them? Wall guys? Plasterer? I don't know what you call them. I'm going to call them wall guys. So he called his wall guy, and the guy comes and he patches the cracks there on the wall, and everything's good for about 2 weeks. And then cracks reappear, and even brought in some friends and cousins. And so now there's more cracks on the wall. He said, I don't know what's going on. He calls his wall guy again. The wall guy comes, patches it up, looks just dandy. For about 2 weeks. And then more cracks. He calls the wall guy. The wall guy said, I can come back and do them again, but it really won't do you any good. He said, why not? He says, because you don't have a wall problem, you have a foundation problem. And unless you deal with the foundation, you'll always be patching cracks. Unless you deal with the foundation, you'll always be patching cracks. The Bible's vision for family is to deal with the foundation. My role as pastor, frankly, is to visit with a lot of people who are always patching cracks because they're never willing to deal with the foundation. But the Bible gives it, and it's a very high vision. But here's the foundation. It isn't complicated at all. Here's the foundation. You ready? You may want to write this down. There is a God. There is a God. If we don't take that seriously, we will always be patching cracks. That's the foundation. I'm going to just toss this out for you real quick. What would your life look like? What would your life look like? What would the life of your family, your marriage, your grandkids, whoever, however far you want to take, what would it look like if you took God seriously? There's your foundation. There is a God. I'm going to elaborate on that now. Ready? There is a God, and the Lord is God, not you. There is an epidemic of God playing going on, and the God playing is where we try and we convince ourselves that we are God, and we have to make the rules for everybody else, but of course we exempt ourselves from the rules we make for everybody else. So everybody has to be sensitive to me, but who do I have to be sensitive to? Nobody. Why? Because I'm playing God. And everybody needs to be serving me, but I don't have to serve anybody. You know why? Because I'm playing God. Let me tell you something. There is a God, and you're not Him. Here's your dose of reality. You're not God. Here's some more reality. Oh, we go from reality to humility. Here's your dose of humility. Your spouse isn't God either. Here's some more humility. Your kids aren't God. And some more, your parents aren't God. Your siblings aren't God. The Lord is God. That's the foundation. You're not God, but you are image of God. Nothing else in creation is described in those terms. Did you know that? Nothing else in creation is described in terms of image of God. You are. Isn't that amazing? Here's your dose of dignity. You are created in the image of God. I'm not going to get through this because I've got a lot to say about image of God. But can I go ahead and lay this out for you? Image of God. You'll want to write these things down, and I'm serious. Number one, image of God carries two really big implications. Here's your first implication. Respect. You bear the image of God. Treat yourself with respect. Next, your spouse bears the image of God. Your children bear the image of God. Your parents bear the image of God. You see what that means? They are worthy of your respect for no other reason than they bear the image of God. I don't buy this stuff anymore. Well, they did that, so I'm not going to respect them anymore. They bear the image of God, and that's not enough to respect? Well, they let me down one time. So big deal. You let people down too. They still bear the image of God. It is not what someone does or how they are that tells whether they're worthy of respect. It's what they bear. They bear the image of God. And if they bear the image of God, they're worthy of our respect. And let's keep that in mind. So that cutting remark that we really want to make, just know, the one you're going to slice into bears the image of God. You really want to go there? The one that you so specifically want to diss, that you would want to belittle or demean, that one bears the image of God. You really want to go there? Do you see how important, how foundational this is for a family and for a marriage? That spouse, that child, that parent that God's given you bears His image. And we better bear that in mind in terms of how we treat them. There are things that sometimes I hear that I can't believe would come out of someone's mouth towards someone that they say matters to them and bears the image of God. And what's really humbling is that sometimes it comes out of my mouth. When we talk about the image of God, here's a very large implication. It means respect. Picking up what I'm laying down? Here's the other part. The image of God in me means that it's on me to reflect what God looks like to the people in my family. To spouse and sons and to parents, it is upon me as image of God to reflect to them what God looks like. If you still have your pen and paper out, here's part of what He looks like, I believe. God's committed to the truth because He knows that when you step away from truth, you start to warp every relationship in your life. Did you know that? If I'm going to reflect the image of God to my family, I need to be a person who's committed to the truth, even if it's not comfortable for me. Here's another part that I understand that's true about God. He's patient. He knows that we're a work in progress. You are surrounded in your family by works in progress. Be patient with them. Show them what God looks like in that. God forgives because we fail. And you fail. And you live in a house with a spouse, with children, or parents that fail. Reflect the image of God to them. Be forgiving. You getting this? This is a high vision for you and for me. Here's one other part about the image of God, though, that we have to get at. Image of God means not God. Now you say, well, we've already kind of gone over that part, Barn. Well, yeah, we have, but no, we haven't. So let me go ahead and illumine you for another view of the image of God. Your spouse is the image of God. So that means they're not God. Your children are the image of God, which means they're not God. Your parents are the image of God, which means they're not God. And here's the point. Did you know that God knows your thoughts? Did you know that your spouse isn't God? Why would we expect them to read our mind? They're not God. Why would I expect that? But I do. Somewhere I'm confused about that. Apparently, Jen can't read my mind. I can read Jen's mind really easy because it always comes right out her mouth. They're not God. Do you know that there are some needs in your heart and life that only God can meet? Only God can give you a sense of meaning in your life. Only God can give you a sense of significance in your life. Only God can give you the deep sense of belonging. Only God can give us the deep sense of hope. Only God can do that. Why would I go to a spouse or to my kids and start expecting them to meet those needs in my life when they're not God? It's a great vision for family. We got to be clear about who's God and who's not. And we got to be real clear that we all bear the image of God. But image of God still means not God. How about this one? Did you know that God relates perfectly to everyone at all times? Take a good look at your spouse and your kids or your parents. They're not God. There will be times, gasp, where they may not relate to you perfectly at all times. You know why? Because they're not God. Here's your foundation. It's a way to quit patching cracks. Get clear about who is God and who is not. And be very clear about who bears the image of God. And be very clear about, because someone bears the image of God does not mean I make them into a God to me. We good on that? It's a very high vision. It's a dangerous vision. Who's God? Who's the image of God? And then we'll live accordingly. Genesis doesn't just tell us about the foundation, but I do believe if we get the foundation right, we'll deal with a lot of the cracks. And if you find yourself patching a lot of cracks in your life and your relationship, I would suggest that it might be a problem with the foundation. All right. Next, Genesis 1 holds out that we are invited to live in God's favor. We're told that God looked at human beings and blessed them and said, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth." Now, he said that, by the way, to the animals in verse 22. So it's pretty clear that the idea there of him blessing them basically means this: populate. Yeah, populate. Yes. So Jen decided to draw the line at 3 populates in our family. And I said, once you have more kids than hands, what difference does it make? But she said 3 was plenty. But God doesn't stop there. It says that he blesses them. And then he trusts them. Did you see it? Only to one creation of God does he say, you need to go, you need to take care of it, you need to exercise dominion, which is responsibility and authority. Only one does he have go to say, I want you to exercise dominion. I want you to exercise care, responsibility, and authority. And that's to human beings. That's to families. Listen, here's what he's saying. I want you to be to the earth what I am to you. God holds dominion over us, right? Stay awake with me. God holds dominion over us, and then he says, I want you to be to the earth what I am to you. He's trusted us. So whatever it is to go and fill the earth, it is not only to populate. I believe what he's getting at is, it's on us to fill the earth with his goodness. Yeah, you do that 2 ways. First, you fill the earth with his goodness by raising up image bearers. This stuff that goes on, sometimes we see these protests on TV. Anyone ever hear of those lately? Protests? Someone's at a campaign and there's protests and blocking traffic. There's stuff going on college campuses. Anyone heard of any of those kinds of things going on? Strange, bizarre things going on. And people look and they shake their head at that, but you know what occurs to me? Somebody raised these kids. I'm not just concerned about what's going on with these college students and these campuses. I'm concerned about what kind of parenting produced this. And are they somehow bringing to the world the goodness that God's brought to them? I don't think so. So sometimes before we step back, we have to understand that each and every one of these folks that are in the big protest at the campaign, each and all these kids that are gathered around on the college campuses to protest, God only knows what, they were raised by somebody. Someone parented them to that. God's trusted us. His great vision is to bless and trust us that we would fill the earth not only with an influence for good, but with image bearers who bear the image of God and bring that to bear in the earth. That's an amazing vision. Here's the thing I realized, and I was humbled by it, but I feel really good about it. And that is the lingering gift that Jen and I can make to the world is our sons. The lingering gift that you make to the world are your kids and grandkids by how you've parented them. And did you raise up image bearers who will reflect the likeness of God in the world? That's the vision. And it's inspiring. It's kind of scary, but it's amazing. So here we have two basic deals, right? The foundation's been set forward. There is a God, and we're not God, but we are in His image. And then there's this, that we live in His favor, and He blesses us, and He trusts us. Now I'm going to land the plane. Because there's one other thing in Genesis 1. It's not explicit, but it is throughout the rest of the Bible, and that is faith. What do you do with the trust of God? He trusts you. How do you respond? If you reject it, okay, you reject it. Understand, you've kind of left yourself to the game playing and being the silly arguments about who's God and the destructive decisions and the nowhere path you get when you try to live life apart from God. That's what you get. You get distorted values when you're raising your children, and then sometimes you release those children and they become a blight on the earth and not a blessing. Why? Because there's a fundamental resistance to God. That's just the truth. But what if we meet His favor? What if we embrace the foundation that's been put forward to us? What if we put our arms around it and really embrace it? Then we get to be those who live in the favor of God, who bear the trust of God, who are committed to raising up image bearers, and those who use what influence we have to accomplish good and to bless the earth. That's the vision. And that's what I've got. Your issue now, your decision is, are you just going to kind of do the end around and avoid God? Or are you going to embrace the vision He's got? And I'll leave you with that.